Significant rise in the number of homicides. And this year, unfortunately, will not be an exception. In 2010, Indianapolis experienced 93 criminal homicides. In the years that followed, a hiring freeze saw IMPD lose hundreds of officers, and the number of homicides went up every year. By the end of 2015, that number had risen to 144. Last year, that number rose to 149, 5 more than the year before. And this year, on 148 separate occasions, someone, a son or daughter, a grandson, a granddaughter, a nephew, a niece, lost their life as a result of violence on our streets. In fact, it has been 7 years since Indianapolis residents could say that their city had fewer criminal homicides than the year before. 7 years. It is heartbreaking. It is maddening. It is senselessness. And it is unacceptable. One homicide in our city is unacceptable. The residents of this city deserve an answer to a simple question. What am I going to do about it? Well, let me start with this. Doing nothing is not an option. This will not be ignored, and this administration will not hide from it. We will not explain it away as a problem that affects only certain parts of our city. I've heard that before. We will not excuse it as the unavoidable fate of a national trend. And this will not be blamed on the victims themselves. Nor will it be blamed on the brave men and women of IMPD who are willing to put their lives on the line to protect us every day. If there is blame to go around, it will begin and it will end right here. I am responsible because I happen to be the mayor. When I took office 2 years ago, I recognized this challenge. I knew the statistics, and I will not now or ever seek to evade it. 3 weeks ago, I directed IMPD Chief Bryan Roach to engage with local, state, and federal law enforcement partners to develop additional ways that we can move the dial on gun violence and on violent crime. In addition, I directed the Office of Public Health and Safety to take a fiercely objective look at our holistic approach to combating violence. In both cases, I asked them to decide what was working and what wasn't in order to help us identify necessary change. Today, we are here to outline the ways that we will continue our fight together as one city. On the first day of this administration, I pledged that our anti-crime strategy would revolve around getting officers out of their cars, getting bloated bureaucracy out of the city-county building, and resources in to our neighborhoods. I dismantled the wasteful Department of Public Safety. We budgeted for the hiring of more than 150 new officers over our first 2 years, and together with the support of the City County Council, we have increased crime prevention grant funding by 25%. And perhaps most importantly, we took these new officers and returned parts of our city to a neighborhood-based beat policing. That is important for one simple reason. Beat policing is working. In those parts of the city where beat policing has taken hold, homicides are down. In fact, in our 19 beats, homicides are down 29% over last year. Next year, we will grow our police force yet again. And by the end of 2019, we are on track to have done what we set out to do: take a chronically and dangerously undermanned police department and staff it appropriately for its mission. This is important not only because it ensures the safety of our officers, but it is critical to our plans to extend our community-based beat policing efforts countywide next year. But simply saying we're going to stay the course is not enough. I'm not willing to stand here today and say that what we are doing is working and that people just need to wait to see the results. I'm not willing to tell Indianapolis residents that they have to wait another year to feel their city is getting safer, but I do have a message that I am willing to deliver today. A message directed to that small group of bad actors who have invaded our most vulnerable neighborhoods to peddle a cycle of violence, drugs, and death. And that message is this: it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how powerful you feel. It doesn't matter how many guns you gather or the people you try and scare. I am not intimidated. We are not intimidated. Indianapolis is not intimidated. And to those bad actors, we are coming for you with a unified resolve and a focused purpose, the likes of which our city has never seen before. Effective immediately, I've ordered IMPD to launch a crackdown to take guns out of the hands of illegally armed felons across our city. People who possess no legal right to carry a firearm. Already this year, we've confiscated more than 2,300 guns from these worst of the worst actors. But in 2018, we intend to surpass those numbers by targeting the network of bad actors who continue to arm themselves in disregard of the law and at the same time compromising the public's safety. Building on a program I supported when I served as the United States Attorney, IMPD continues to enhance new partnerships with Marion County Forensic Services to connect shell casings and firearms in real time to serial shooters, disrupting criminal activity and preventing future violence. I've also ordered an immediate increase in probation, parole, and community correction sweeps in areas where we are seeing the highest levels of gun violence. To assist with all of this, I am pleased to say that beginning in 2018, United States Attorney Josh Minkler and his criminal division have agreed to a surge of federal prosecutorial resources to assist in taking these worst of the worst actors off of our streets into federal court and ultimately into federal prisons that are often hundreds, if not thousands of miles away from this city. And if these hardened criminals aren't eligible for federal prosecution, Marion County Prosecutor Terry Curry's office stands at the ready this next year to dedicate unprecedented resources toward the prosecution of those who illegally arm themselves and wreak havoc on law-abiding people living peacefully in our neighborhoods. In case any of these marketers of death don't believe I'm talking to them, in case they believe that they are anonymous and untouchable when they illegally pick up a gun and walk out the door, I want to deliver one more message on behalf of the thousands of community members that I've spoken to over the last year. We know who you are. We know because your neighborhoods have told us who you are. Neighborhoods that have been silenced through fear and neglect, but are ready to stand up and reclaim the safety and the security of their own neighborhood streets. Neighborhoods that want their young people to have every opportunity to break this cycle of pain and rejoin civil society, but are also willing to work with us to remove those individuals who have forsaken their obligations as citizens of this city. And that brings me to the last tenet of our 2018 strategy. Because as we return IMPD to the operational strength that allows our officers to engage at a neighborhood level, we also must acknowledge what we've learned over the last year, that after years of zone policing and overworked officers, our neighborhood and faith groups have also felt the effects of the decision to roll back community engagement. And so, if you hear nothing today, please hear this. IMPD cannot, will not, roll back the tide of violence alone. Every person, every business, every organization, every church, every neighborhood, every community in this city has a role to play and can help in this effort. And today, just as we are returning our police force to full operational strength, I am proud to also set forth a plan to invest in our neighborhoods and return them to full operational strength over the course of the coming years. Driven by a public health approach to crime, at the core of this plan is a simple concept. Violence begets violence. Left unchecked, violence spreads across neighborhoods like and infectious disease, but study after study shows that by engaging at the street level, we can reach young people who have been touched by the spread of violence and stop its transmission. But most importantly, these same studies show that you can't stop violence behind the desk of a government building. You can't stop violence by investing people who don't live in the neighborhoods. You can stop violence by investing in the people within these neighborhoods. You can stop violence by engaging faith leaders. You can stop violence by engaging community activists. And you can stop violence by lending your willing ear to mothers and to fathers, and your helping hand to their sons and to their daughters. Put another way, you help neighborhoods by giving them the tools to help themselves. And that's exactly what this program will do. To begin, we will hire the city's first neighborhood violence reduction director, who will wake up every day with one simple job: strengthen and engage with neighborhood, faith, and community groups across the city who are willing to reduce violence in their area. Second, the Office of Public Health and Safety will deploy 4 neighborhood peacemakers. These people will be from our neighborhoods. They will be people who live in our neighborhoods, and they will be people working for our neighborhoods. And most importantly, they'll be individuals whose life experiences will allow them to provide services and mentoring to those looking to escape the deadly cycle of violence. Third, we will invest directly in community groups. In addition to the $2.5 million already allocated by our City County Council toward our crime prevention grant program, we will now make available $300,000 in new funding to those people and groups seeking to make an impact on the streets of our cities. Working together with our partners at IUPUI, we will rely on those with expertise in criminal justice to recommend where these dollars need to be invested. But just as important, these same experts will study and report on the true impact of each group's performance each and every year, ensuring that taxpayers are funding programs that work and that taxpayers are not funding programs that don't. For the last decade, our city's homicide rate has ticked upward, and beyond each of these sobering numbers is the unquantifiable human cost of such violence, not just for those directly involved, but for the friends, the families, the loved ones, and the neighborhoods impacted by these acts of senseless violence. As I said a moment ago, it is heartbreaking and maddening, and it is senseless. It is unacceptable. But it is not inevitable. I refuse to believe that. I do not believe that the lives of people of this city are predestined. That because of where they live or because of who they are, that any single one of their fates lies beyond our ability to do good as one city. I ran for mayor because I believed and I hoped. I believed we could be one city. I believe that today. I hoped that through unity, we will roll back the violence. And today, I persist in that hope, in that belief and that hope. For the next 750 days, I remain unmoved. We will continue the fight, day by day, street by street, neighborhood by neighborhood. And we will make Indianapolis safer than the community we inherited. I thank you.
Mr. Mayor, two things. Number one, because you're looking forward prospectively to 2018 with these new initiatives, A, are we writing off 2017? And B, you and I have had this conversation before. How is this different than what's been done in the past, the reorganization of IMPD, the investment in community groups? How is any of this different than anything that we've seen over the past 10 years?
Well, let me take the second question first. It's profoundly different because thanks to the City Council's support, we have added 85 officers this year. The 2018 budget will call for adding 85 officers next year. I would fully intend to introduce a budget for 2019 that will add 85 officers in 2019. And even with retirements and attrition, that will increase the net number of additional officers by 140, 150 officers. That will go a long way toward returning IMPD to historically high levels of officers, which will do two things: enable us to expand the scope of our community-based beat jurisdictional policing, which, as I cited in the statistics, and these statistics, by the way, are based on 1 year. So I'm not saying that they are dispositive, but they are cause for hope. We will be able to expand the scope of our community-based beat-oriented policing, and at the same time, I believe that beat policing goes a long way toward increasing relationships between the law enforcement professionals and our residents, and on so many levels, including cooperation, intelligence, and proactive policing, as well as police-community relations. That's a good thing. If I live in a neighborhood and if I run into problems and I pick up the phone because I need help, I hope that in more neighborhoods than you can count next year and in the years after, I will be calling someone I know who also happens to be an IMPD officer. I can't remember your first question.
Does that mean basically we're writing off 2017 because odds are there are going to be 3 or 4 more homicides between now and the end of the year based on the rate of about 1 murder every 2.5 days?
Yeah. Well, we are at 148 in terms of criminal homicides today, and with 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks left in this year, it's entirely possible that we will get to last year's number and then maybe a couple of more. And that is unfortunate. But it does not in any way impact our resolve this year. I hope I can speak for our chief and his command staff, along with the rank and file, that they will be doing everything they can, not only in December of 2017, but starting anew in January of 2018, to keep our streets as safe as they can be. Chief, you want to add to that?
Yeah, we'll continue. Every homicide we have, every non-fatal shooting we have has been more focused and more targeted this year than I've seen in the past. And we'll continue to do that. And we don't see crime in calendar years. We see it as events in people's lives. And we'll approach it that way, and we'll continue to do that.
Mayor, you campaigned on a promise to fight crime in the city. If you could give yourself a performance review in that effort, what would that review say?
Well, I think the report would say that we have set in place the foundation for progress. As my opening comments, I think, underscored, this is not a challenge that has occurred overnight. In fact, we have seen repeated years of increased criminal homicides, 7 running. I've been responsible for 2 of those 7 years. The 5 years before, I did what I could as the United States Attorney, and I think we did some pretty good work in and around the Indianapolis community, dismantling drug trafficking organizations and prosecuting those who illegally possess firearms in historic numbers. Today's announcement may remind some of you who covered the United States Attorney's Office in those years of some of the things that we did in that office. And I was pleased to say that Josh Minkler remains committed and will be a full partner as we go forward. We've laid in place, I believe, a foundation upon which we will build. I do think that the outreach that this administration is doing to community groups is unprecedented. Yes, it has been talked about before, but I think that the kind of outreach that I have personally attempted to participate in, the kind of outreach that many in this audience represent, from neighborhood organizations, faith-based groups, community and neighborhood associations, speaks volumes about the acknowledgement and the recognition that our city has, is that while it is my responsibility, I cannot do it alone. While IMPD may have more officers than ever before, or at least in the recent past, they cannot do it alone. If we are to truly meaningfully move the dial in gun violence in our city and in the criminal homicides, we will do it together, and in unity, working for a better Indianapolis. So I hope that we've laid in place progress in the future.
There seems to be consensus within your administration that you're making progress, even though it looks like there could be another new record this year. Is it possible that in 2018 there could be another new record and you'll still consider progress being made, or will that be a time where you have to really rethink those strategies?
As I said earlier, one homicide is unacceptable. So I will be frustrated in the early days of January if 2018 begin with homicides. And we will continue to assess what is working and try to improve upon it, try to enhance it, try to scale it up. And we will also assess very vigorously what we are doing and what doesn't happen to be working, and discard it. So we will constantly make those types of judgments throughout 2018. I am confident that we will together move the dial. How soon that will be before we can say definitively that a true difference is made, well, your judgment will be as probably good as mine in that regard. But we are standing together along with our community partners, united today as one city, dedicated to the proposition that will make a difference for a safer and more peaceful city.
When you look at the resources or the investment required for a violence reduction director or coordinator and
Well, we've had some real success in other communities that have done that. In fact, the truth is we did something very similar to that years ago at IMPD. I believe they were referred to as neighborhood resource officers. I'll let Paul speak to the Office of Public Health and Safety's initiative in this regard, but it's not so much a new idea, but returning to an idea that worked, frankly, in many neighborhoods throughout the city. But frankly, if I can speak without personal knowledge, I think it went by the wayside because we had a hiring freeze. And the luxury of having neighborhood resource officers, those folks were reassigned to the street because we needed more officers, rank and file officers, answering the calls coming in. Paul, do you want to add anything to that?
Paul Babcock with the Office of Public Health and Safety. And just to answer the question, it's twofold investment. So it's investment in individuals who will be, as the mayor said, wake up every day focused on working with community groups and neighborhood associations to really build capacity and invest in activities in the neighborhood that are solving and helping our violence issue. And then the second fold is resources, so actual financial resources going towards entities and agencies and organizations that are using and employing evidence-based activities that we are then measuring and showing that they actually are successful. And as the mayor said, this is about investing resources efficiently and appropriately, and if it doesn't work, change it and find something that does.
Mr. Mayor, you talked about 2011, when we saw the spike in the city's murder rate. A couple things were going on at that time. Number one, we're still in the midst of the worst economy, so the city's getting a lot less revenue. And number two, apparently there was a, if I remember correctly, a shift in like the community grants and how the grant money was issued. They went away from sort of those neighborhood groups and more toward like offender reentrance and other things. Do you plan in sort of this new approach to maybe readdress that to get back to, you know, the violence prevention that groups like 1020 and other organizations were doing? Because it seemed back in 11 there was a shift in how those dollars were allocated, and that's when we saw the murders start to go through the roof.
Yeah, I certainly would be open and willing to consider any community and neighborhood-based crime prevention program. As I said earlier, I'm very proud of the council's record in that regard. For the last couple of years running, our city-county council has increased funding for crime prevention grants. Also, just as a collateral matter and as a citizen, because I was not mayor at the time, I was pleased that those crime prevention grants, the allocation, the application process was moved over to Central Indiana Community Foundation, which we all acknowledge as a group whose expertise is assessing grant applications and, most importantly, judging their efficacy or their efficiency. So I think that those were steps in the positive direction. If there was a delay or a glitch in the consistency of the funding, I think that has all been resolved. And I hope with council approval, we'll be able to move forward with additional funding for many of these efforts, and that we will see in 2018 more of a community-oriented, faith-based group approach that will engage people who heretofore, in my opinion, have either never been truly asked to be engaged or never been given the resources that they need to be fully engaged.
There have been several references to officer staffing levels over the years and how that's coincided with the uptick in homicides from year to year. Has your administration concluded that that's been the number one cause for that spike year over year these last several years?
Well, I know officer levels haven't helped, and as I said earlier, I'm not placing the blame on anyone except myself. This is my job. This is my responsibility. But I think with increased IMPD presence, particularly when you have officers who can take time during their shifts to get out of their cars, to walk through residential neighborhoods and introduce themselves to the people that they serve, to stop in retail or commercial establishments and ask how things are going. You know, Chief Roach and I have been doing that once a month for the last 7 or 8 months. If I can say so, at least from my perspective, that has been very well received by the neighborhoods, and we've visited neighborhoods in all 4 corners of the city, and we'll continue to do that. Now, the chief and I are not going to be able to do it every day, but our rank and file officers will be able to do it every day, and I think that will have a profound difference. Again, not only on more proactive, engaged law enforcement so that problems may be interceded or stopped before they occur, but I think that on the level of community relationship to our police department, community-based policing is a very positive step forward. To reiterate, because people throughout our city will have a police officer who they know, and that police officer will be charged with the responsibility of knowing them, so that you're interacting as neighbors, not as police officials with residents.
You talked about switching to that community-based model for quite some time. We're only adding a net 30 officers next year. How does that allow us to make a shift that we couldn't make before?
Well, I'll let the chief answer that. I mean, I would answer it as just because you're netting out 35 or 40 officers out of this class of 85 doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only amount of officers that cannot be assigned to a beat-oriented system of community-based policing. That's going to be up to the chief and his command staff, how he wants to allocate resources. Certainly, additional officers make it more likely than not that we will be able to expand the program significantly, but not limited to just the number of net gains that we make in any one particular year. But I defer to the chief on more specifics.
Yeah, so I want to be clear, just because we create beats doesn't mean we're going to have officers to fill them. But this is a start. It really is a change in mindset. I worked a beat on Thanksgiving, and great officers out there. And one of the things, and they asked their chief of police, when you're not on a run, we sit over here, right? And so they identified a parking lot. I go over there, and what we have created was zone policing. And if we're giving blame out here, I created zone policing because of our staffing levels. But we created a mindset of officers is that they were so concerned to be in the right position so that they could get to your house or respond to your house as quick as possible. As they go back, they play tennis. They go back to center court and wait for the next run to come out, and then they get to it, and then they go back to center court again. That's the mindset we try and change when we start going back to beats and allocating officers and starting to tell them, this is your responsibility, we're going to hold you accountable for this area. I don't want you to think that every one of those beats will be filled, because they won't be. But it's a start, changes the mindset, and then at the end of the mayor's term, I think we'll be there.
But I know you are talking about going to most of the city, not all of the city just yet. What's different now from 6 months ago or 12 months ago?
So number one, we're looking at, we had just started it with the 15 beats. 4 of them are, 4 additional are entertainment zones. We were looking at the effectiveness that we have as a police department in those smaller areas. And quite frankly, it's not until this time this year and the first part of next year that really we'll be able to have a few more officers in beats than what we would be able to now. Does that make sense? So we're not that great, we're not that better off than we were operational staffing in order to do this, but we're a little better. 2015 we couldn't have done it. 2016 we expanded to the 16 beats.
Chief, realistically, what can we expect IMPD to do? Because if you look at the nature of the homicides we've had this year, there are a lot less bad guys shooting bad guy. It seems a lot more fights, a lot more arguments, a lot more taking place, early evenings and indoors. You can't put a police officer in everybody's home. Realistically, and like you said, Mr. Mayor, it can't be just the city. Realistically, what are you guys expecting, looking at the nature of how this year's homicides been compared to previous years?
So they are different. There's a different level of violence. Dr. Hampton was talking this morning about this group that's creating the violence. There's not even a code among them. We've seen kids being involved. We see females being involved, which is different than what we've seen in the past. What my hope is even though the mayor said, hey, it's not the police department's responsibility, we will continue to work as if it's our responsibility, but our hope is the community will see it as their responsibility also. And that communication and that engagement with beat policing will allow us to maybe, as police officers, understand what is going on a little better. There are people that know, that are impacting the lives of the same people that we want to impact. Those people know what's going on. They know that mindset. And quite frankly, we're probably behind the curve a little bit, and that's why we need the help of those who can influence those people's lives, because we don't live it and don't understand it as well as you pointed out.